Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Federal Reserve. I got to tell you, it seems very, very curious. Seems very on point that a recession is coming. A recession is coming because it's wanted, not because it's a natural thing that, it can't help it. It just happens. Who knew? No. Decisions, policies, ideas, thoughts. Federal Reserve raised interest rates 0.25% again. And you go, why? Why? Inflation's slowing. Everyone's going, inflation's slowing. Even the Federal Reserve says inflation's slowing, but we're still going to remain aggressive. And why? Why? Well, because the wealthy in corporate America want a recession. They want the pain and suffering that's going to come with a recession. They want to claw back the power that they once had over those working stiffs. They want to claw back that power. They want to lower wages. That's the reality. And we're seeing it playing out. And what's interesting to me is again, our politics play into this as well. Because if you look at what the Federal Reserve is doing, raising rates really aggressively, in fact, much more aggressively than most economists think is needed, except the really crazy way out ones who, again, on corporate payrolls. Add that to the conservative messaging around inflation that really has been covering for the corporate greed and gouging that we've all been suffering under. And we're being set up for a rude awakening. I mean, we really are. This seems planned. It seems planned to move the country further towards corporate rule. You got to create those crises, because out of every good crisis, there's opportunity. And you see it all over these social media apps where these rich people are going, hey, be prepared for when it comes, because it's like they know what's coming. We've seen this movie. We've seen the game before. We know how the Fed works. We know how rich people work. It's how they get richer. They get richer by making the poor poorer. And the sad reality is we're falling for it. You look at the responses people have to problems, and it's all simplistic. It's all Joe Biden's fault. Oh, how much easier can it be? Blame the old guy in the White House. The guy that they say can't do anything. Sleepy Joe doesn't know where he is, but he's doing all this stuff. He's crashing the economy. It's all his fault. And it's easy to blame on that, because if it were something more than that, well, then people might organize around it. People might have some outrage at the fact that they're being gouged. Nobody likes to get ripped off, right, left, or center, red hat or blue hat. Nobody likes to get ripped off. And we're in this moment. And again, you look over the last several decades, what has happened? Crisis. And what comes out of crisis? Oh, sorry, working people, tighten the belt. Tighten the belt. You go back to the 70s. Stagflation. Oh, we gotta crush those unions and those wages. We need to privatize. We need to deregulate. We need to privatize. And the birth of neoliberalism. We give corporate America all this power. They'll crush those workers. Don't you just worry. And Carter allowed it with trucking deregulation and airline deregulation, and you effectively crushed those industries. And Reagan came in full tilt boogie with his supply side voodoo Reaganomics and massive tax cuts, took the top marginal tax rate from 70% all the way down to 28%, creating a massive deficit. And then get people concerned. Oh, we're spending too much money, on those social programs. Because be afraid, the boogeyman, we got to spend all this money on military, and you can't question that. And they've trained us. Over the decades, they've trained us to think that anytime there's a crisis, working people have to take it on the chin. Anytime there's a crisis, we need to destroy our social safety net so that the wealthy can have more, because they're smart. They know what to do with the money, and they are. They do know what to do with it. They make more for themselves. And the sad reality is Democrats have not been the greatest champions either. Like I said, Carter, during his administration, neoliberalism took root. And it fully flourished under Reagan. Clinton, while better than Dole or H.W. Bush, did really dumb stuff. Bad trade deals, bad social policy, bad corporate policy, laid the groundwork for all of the horrible. And again, this idea that we've got to compromise, we've got to work together, and moved us, full tilt boogie down the neoliberal superhighway. Privatization, deregulation, profitization. And what we've done over these last decades, we've sold off our cities, we've sold off our infrastructure, we've sold off our souls, basically, because, got to tighten the belt. And the thing that bothers me is, again, we keep falling into this. And, you can go through each of the president's eras and you can go, this was bad, this was good, this was, I look at the Trump era. And what's interesting to me is I'm now listening to people tell me how much they're concerned about debt and deficits, when during those 4 years of the Trump era, we literally spent a quarter of our debt. Nobody seemed to care about it then, spending like drunken sailors. And in fact, everyone tells me how great the economy was under Trump while doing massive, enormous amounts of deficit spending. Again, disconnect. But telling me how wonderful everything was, propped up on debt spending. But now we've got to cut all that out. It's crazy. And the weird thing is this is not new. What is new? And I had someone ask me what was the worst part of the Trump administration? And I said, the worst part of the Trump era was finding out, not about what Trump was or what Trump was going to do. We knew he was going to do all of the things he did. We knew he was going to be involved in scandal after scandal. We knew he was going to run the White House like a mafia don. We knew that. What we didn't know, and what we learned during that era is, we learned an awful lot about our family, friends, and neighbors. We're finding out more every day now. These hearings are coming out, these depositions, all of this stuff in the courts. For instance, one of the controllers at the Trump organization's talking about the hush money payments that they use to keep people in line. Who didn't already know that? We're just now confirming it in the court, when someone putting their hand on the Bible. But the thing that gets me is, the thing that bothers me is the idea that we were all somewhere, somewhere in the same book. We all kind of had the same ideas, somewhere in, maybe not on the same chapter or the same page, but at least in the same library, at the minimum. And here we are in this weird moment of alternative facts and alternative realities and all of this division and hatred and I've got to win. Look, I remember learning as a kid about, book bans of the 50s. And you go, it's ludicrous. Who would do such a thing? Why would you do such a thing? How could that happen? And yet here we are. They're banning books. I mean, they're not burning them yet. Keyword yet. I mean, it's coming. This kind of wow. And the thing that gets me is we're not allowed to come to solutions. We're not allowed. We've got to have our hats, got our red hat or our blue hat. We've got our polar opposite camps, and we cannot, no, ever. And our politics used to be that place where we did come together, where we did, compromise a little bit, and we were able to hold on to our values a little bit, but you got things done. The problem is the fight is more important than the solution. We've got lucrative industries out there that are making tons of money off of division. There are cottage industries on how we can stoke division. For instance, I got an email from Wayne LaPierre today. Go, who's Wayne LaPierre? He's the gun guy. He's the head of the National Rifle Association, the gun fetish guy, who sent me this email and said that the title line was, "The NRA will always stand up for your rights." Okay. In the email, he says, and I go, look, I'm not against people and their rights. We want to fight for rights. Wayne LaPierre says the NRA is the only organization standing in the way of widespread gun confiscation. What? Where's that? Where's that at? Did I miss something? Are they in the same van with the stove troopers? Do we have, roving marauders going house to house stealing guns? No, the answer is no. Literally nobody is calling for that. Nobody. Nobody. But this is the kind of stuff that they stoke, because they get the simple to go, they're going to come for my guns. Nobody's coming for your guns. Nobody. But there's a lot of money by the NRA to be made by this. They want you to pay your dues. They want the gun manufacturers to keep ramping up production to get you to go, oh, they're gonna take this. I better go buy some more. Obama was the greatest salesman for guns, because they were able to go, hey, he's coming for your gun. He never was, but they sold it as that. And people went out in droves and bought guns they probably never even opened, because they were coming. And who made money? The NRA. Because for them, the solution, and understand, the majority of people agree on solutions on how we move forward on the gun issue. Universal background checks, universally accepted. High numbers of both Democrats and Republicans. Accountability, something we used to believe in. No, can't do that anymore. Sorry. And it's not just that. It's not the gun issue. It's all of them. Immigration's another thing. We're never going to be allowed to come to an immigration issue, because you've got the belief that one side wants to swing the doors wide open and let everybody in, let billions of people in, and the other side that wants to build a 4,000-foot wall, 16 feet deep, so that no one ever comes in. We're isolated from the rest of the world and nothing. And sorry, that's not how the world works. But a solution's never coming, because it's the outrage. We've got to keep us ticked off at each other, got to keep us angry. And yet today I find a report from the Commonwealth Fund. And this is one of those moments where you go, and again, another problem, not going to be solved because we're so divided and pitted against each other. Commonwealth Fund report finds that the United States is experiencing the worst health outcomes in the entire world, higher than any other country equal to our income. We're more likely to die younger and from avoidable causes. According to the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the globe of countries, like us, the OECD countries, they spend about 9.6% of their GDP on healthcare. You know how much we spend? Almost 18%. Nearly double. And yet we get worse outcomes in wide arrays of infant mortality, maternal death rates. You go highest in the world, actually. Highest suicide rates in the world, highest maternal and infant mortality rates, the highest death rates of avoidable and treatable diseases. And why? Because we have the lowest rates of practicing physicians in hospitals, hospital beds per 1,000 people. We have the lowest rates of people going to see the doctor, because we've got a privatized system that says everybody's got to have skin in the game, which means every time you go to the doctor, if you can get an appointment, you're digging into your pocket. We're the only country that doesn't have universal national health care, and yet we pay almost double what everybody else is. Now understand, we know that we've known this for a long time. Nothing new, nothing surprising, nothing shocking. It is what has been happening to us. But we don't get to talk about that, because we're still talking about, they're going to take my guns. And we need a wall. And we're fighting over masks. And we're fighting over stuff that's meant to divide and keep us pitted against each other. Because we can't talk about really solving problems. We've just got to be angry at each other. And our politics is where this is happening. And look, the plan going forward to privatize and profitize and destroy Medicare and Medicaid, that's their answer. Make it more expensive, make it more further out of reach, and again, harm working people. Again, every one of these crises that they create, who gets the short end of the stick? You do. I do. We do. So when do we put it down? When do we say enough already? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Virginia's back in the news. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin asked the House and the Senate there to fix a screw-up, because evidently they've had a little accounting error, something very minor on the education front. Simple spreadsheet mistake. Oops. Could happen to anyone. You know, happens every day. You overcalculate about $203 billion in education funding. Could have happened to anyone. It was a Post-it note got misplaced. So K through 12 funding, about $203 million short. Now he's asking to fix it because he got caught. They finally figured out, this is going to really screw over some school districts, especially our rural base. Because this is the dirty little secret. Rural schools are much more dependent on state funding across the country than our urban schools. Because urban schools are already taking it on the chin. It's those rural schools who are used to having high school football games and used to having stuff because they've been getting money from the state. This was kind of their money. So seeing Republicans spring to action in Virginia, kind of impressive. Because they know who their constituents are. And they're going to fill this gap. Don't know how yet. I'm not sure. But they say that they're going to make those rural school districts whole. No real talk about the urban school districts. Now, this is one of those moments where you go, where are they coming up with 201 million? The Post-it note was a little off. $201 million over the next 2 years in that state for education. Where are they going to get it? I'm not sure yet. I'm sure they're going to fudge the numbers, and you know where it's coming from, right? It's going to come from the more vulnerable people. It's going to come from the disabled. It's going to come from low income. You name it. It's going to come from the people who don't have advocates who are going to be able to stand up and fight for themselves. And this is sadly how this game plays out all the time. And this is where my frustration is. There are moments where we could rally together and say, no, maybe we should have the Glenn Youngkins of the world dig a little deeper into their pocket because they got deep pockets. They can afford to fund education. Instead of all of these schemes to defund our public education system, how about we have a plan to, fully fund them? But no. I'm waiting to see. Again, devil in the details. We'll find out where they, where they're going to shake out $201 million. Maybe they've got big couch cushions. I don't know. Maybe there's some, when they do the laundry, a check will fall out. I don't know, but it's going to be a heavy lift, and there are going to be people who are going to suffer for this. And who do you think that's going to be? And this, for me, is the central question in every one of these political debates. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? It goes back to high school government. My teacher back then said government decides who gets what. And for too long, the working class of this country has been getting the screws because we haven't organized our political power. We haven't organized our ability to stand up and say no more. So for me, over the next couple of days, we may see a trickle. We may see, I almost guarantee it's going to come from disability funding. It's going to come from low-income housing and heating and those kind of things to help the poor. Because, well, they're already down there. Might as well kick them. Because it's what they do well. Under the guise, and this is, again, I keep coming back to this, under the guise that we're this grand Christian nation. Under the guise that, we're our, I'm not going to say brothers keepers because that's out the window. But in looking at this, again, Virginia's another state like Pennsylvania, like Iowa. All of these schemes with the goal of one thing: privatize public education. I'll have to tell you, I don't think this was an accident. I know, Rick, sounds conspiratorial. I don't know. Seems convenient. Seems like a large amount of money, kind of too big to be missed. It's not like a rounding error. It's not like, oh, we moved the decimal point one and oops. It's not like that. And it's interesting how the oopses always are on the negative for working people. It's never, oops, we tax the rich too much. Oops, we asked Glenn Youngkin to kick in too much. It's never that. It's always, oops, sorry, poor people. Tighten the belt. Oh, gee, we would have loved to have funded that education program. Oh, darn, next time. We'll get you on the rebound. It always seems, am I the only one who sees this? And then here we go. School districts are going to have to make tough choices. And yet, the corporate side of education, they don't seem to run out of money. Especially if you turn on my local radio stations where they're advertising how wonderful Charter Week and Choice Week is and vouchers are. And yet, when the studies come out, they don't do any better. In a lot of cases, do worse. And a lot of them, within 5 years, fail. Like most businesses. And the question I come back to is, when do we say enough? When do we as working people finally come around to the idea that our interests are at least in the same library? Maybe even in the same book and on the same chapter. I want to go back to believing that we all have the same wants and needs and hopes. But I'll tell you, it's getting harder and harder. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcasts, you'll find ours. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That day marked a pivotal moment in the continuing Flint sit-down strike. The nationwide strike against GM started in Flint, Michigan in late December. By late January, UAW organizers agreed that nearby Chevy engine plant number 4 had to be shut down. It was a massive facility. It employed 4,000 workers on 2 shifts. The plant superintendent had been firing union activists. Armed guards patrolled every inch of the facility to prevent a sit-down. Union organizers knew there were company spies in their ranks. They planned the takeover by staging distracting job actions at nearby Chevy plants number 9 and then number 6. This would draw the guards away from plant number 4. And so, on this day, just as the day's shift was ending, workers sat down at Chevy plant number 9. the company guards were ready to launch an attack. They began beating and gassing the sit-downers. The Women's Emergency Brigade smashed plant windows to dissipate the gas. The diversion worked. Guards left Chevy number 4 unattended. Workers then turned off all the machines and barricaded themselves in. The plant guards tried to re-enter and were met with pistons, connector rods, and fire hoses. The Women's Emergency Brigade gathered outside the plant and locked arms. UAW organizer Joe Sayan announced, quote, "We want the whole world to understand what we are fighting for. We are fighting for freedom and life and liberty. This is our great opportunity. What if we should be defeated? What if we should be killed? We have only one life. That's all we can lose, and we might as well die like heroes than like slaves." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
An old political saying notes that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. However, given the proliferation of today's goofball culture wars and fanatical right-wing phobias, that truism should be updated to say evil swarms when power-hungry leaders unleash the crazies. Which brings us to the U.S. House of Representatives, now led by a run-of-the-mill corporate Republican, Kevin McCarthy. He's always been a crassly ambitious political climber, untethered to any moral principle larger than his own ego. So he's not trusted, even by GOP lawmakers. Indeed, in an almost comical public spectacle, it took 4 days and 15 rounds of voting in January before Kevin could cut enough desperate deals to get the slimmest majority of his own Republican colleagues to make him Speaker of the House. To squeak out his win, though, he had to hand big chunks of his official power to a gaggle of extremist, far-right-wing legislators who are, in a word, bonkers. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, and other members of the GOP's Kooky Caucus promote unhinged QAnon conspiracy theories, warn that Jews are firing lasers from outer space to start wildfires, lionize Vladimir Putin and Adolf Hitler, call for the execution of Democratic leaders, and insist that the government is staging school shootings as an excuse to outlaw guns. Okay, they're nuts, and politics makes strange bedfellows. But McCarthy has not just climbed into bed with them. He's snuggling up tightly, naming them to powerful committees, publicly legitimizing their screwballism, and intentionally bringing the evil of bigotry, intolerance, and even fascism in from the fringe of politics to sit in the seat of power. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is shameful, and it's dangerous. Evil swarms when so-called leaders meekly give permission for crazies to use the government power to rule over us.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, she's announced that on February 15th, she's going to announce she's running for president. You can't make this up. So, the pie fight about to begin, as Trump has already begun attacking DeSantis, should be interesting on the Republican side to see the sideshow. Is this going to help us move the country forward in any way? I don't think so. And again, I come back to this idea. There are problems we can solve, but we're not allowed. Because again, it's the fight. The fight is more important than the solutions. It's more lucrative, certainly, than the solutions. And here to share some thoughts on, well, is there hope? Is there a way forward in the environment that we're in? Or, do we need a catastrophe to bring us back together? I've asked my good friend, former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, to come share some thoughts. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
As always, Rick, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
So, let's start with Nikki Haley. Thoughts on, she said she was not going to run if Trump was going to run. Evidently she is. Any thoughts there?
Well, look, clearly, I think a lot of Republican presidential wannabes see Donald Trump as a wounded animal right now. I think they underestimate him. I think there's still a hardcore base out there. But I think the term pie fight, Rick, is probably being a little bit too gracious with what we're going to see there. I mean, you've already seen Trump attacking DeSantis. He may not do that with Nikki Haley for a little bit because I don't think he'll see her as big a threat. But the fun's going to start, I think, pretty soon with that. And she's she's got an interesting record. I was reading some things early, and one comment that was made that I kind of think is going to resonate with voters a little bit is that she started out as a really principled politician, doing the right thing for the state of South Carolina, and then all of a sudden she became just solely embedded with the Trump organization, so to speak. And here we are, and she's now going to try to outmaneuver DeSantis to be the next Donald Trump. She's not going to, I think, espouse the Republican line that I grew up with. They'll give lip service to the old Republican establishment, but this is going to be a culture war type Republican primary season. Trump's already set the stage. DeSantis has set the stage. And in order to compete, she's going to have to engage in those same kind of crazy culture wars that I think ultimately will defeat the Republican candidate, whoever it might be, in 2024.
Well, I mean, that's the hope. I mean, the hope is that we're not the country that we appear to be on the surface at this moment. But the fear is and again, I started off with this, the idea that during the Trump era, it's not what we learned about Trump; it's what we learned about ourselves that I think is most frightening, or at least our friends and neighbors.
Sure. I mean, this primary is going to be about division. This is going to be about whipping up a base. You're not going to hear except through lip service. I mean, look, Rick, every candidate will talk about unity. Everybody candidate will talk about unifying the country, those kind of things. But when you strip away those sound bites and look at what they're really doing, you're going to see, again, culture wars that are nothing but division. I think coming out of every Republican presidential nominee, save potentially somebody like an Asa Hutchinson or a Larry Hogan. I think they move to the middle and they truly try to represent more than just a really radical right base.
No, but here's the problem that I have. There's so much special interest in division. There's so much so much money and an investment in the fight that the solution, if we gave on every point, if we did everything that the outrage machine wants, it would never be enough, and they would still create other divisions to keep us ripped apart. And this is where my fear is, because I look at guns. I talked about the gun issue today. I got an email from Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, who said that they're coming to confiscate your guns. Nobody's coming to confiscate your guns.
No,
nobody.
It's absurd. We've heard it for 40 years. Obama was going to do it. He didn't do it. Biden was going to do it. He's not doing it. Nobody's going to come confiscate guns. It's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. What appears to be I used to say an organization that had some, at least some backbone to it. Apparently they've had their own internal issues with how they've managed the NRA in the last few years and how they've managed all these people's money. But things like that, you're right. There's big money in some of the special interest groups. And let's be honest, there's big money in media too. I mean, the media stokes these fears too. And it's all about clickbait and it's all about money. And we know that fear and division drives voters oftentimes. And so it's going to be difficult. You're going to have some folks just stand up and be damned and maybe lose a couple of elections but really try to talk to people and get down and get through that. That's the only way you can get through, but it's going to be, you're absolutely right, that it's going to be really, really difficult with the money that folks like the NRA have, others have, and the media on both the right and the left who really play onto the fears.
Yeah, but my problem is there doesn't seem to be any left media. I mean, I keep hearing about this mythical left media, and I'm going, where is it? Did I miss this?
Well, look, there are messengers still out there. There's still messengers that are still out there. But there's no question that the media from the right, the Fox News, the Tucker Carlsons, those folks, those are the ones that really stoke that. Those are the ones making a lot of money off of these divisions. And that filters down to candidates like Donald Trump and others. I think that DeSantis is stoking those fears. I think Youngkin was elected stoking those fears in Virginia. And, we'll see if the Republican Party wants to move beyond that and actually try to do some things and work together and make some moves with these media folks and see what can happen. I want to try to, have some hope and optimism here, because the alternative is really very difficult to do, but it's not easy. There's an interesting book that if you haven't seen it, by Chris Stirewalt, called Broken News. I'll give Chris a plug. He's a great guy. He was the Fox News political analyst that called the race for Joe Biden in Arizona and got fired for doing it. And he's written this book called Broken News, and it talks about exactly what you're saying, how it's money driven by the media to kind of divide this country. He offers some pretty good insights, and part of it is insights for people that, we've got to push back on that, and we've got to get into other silos.
Yeah, and look, and I think we've got to reclaim the word news. I mean, I look at Fox. Fox is not news. I've had people go, "Well, you're news." I'm not news. This is an opinion program. This is
right.
This is me having a conversation and wanting to delve to find out what is news. But I'm not telling you what news is. And I think we've screwed that word up so badly that there's so many new quote unquote news sources that none of them are accurate, but they feed into our confirmation bias.
No, look, I think that's part of Chris's book. It is just simply that. We have moved from the days of Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley and Chet Huntley and those folks, where you had the news organizations were giving you the same set of facts that was news, and then people would make their opinions from those same set of facts. We don't have the same set of facts anymore coming from cable news and all of these crazy streaming services and some radio shows, Rick, not yours, but others that they just want to make stuff up. So you're right. It's not news anymore. It's entertainment. And it's entertainment for people, and it plays on the fears, and it makes them money.
Yeah, my North Star is always, how do you make working people's lives better? I tell the story all the time. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. I think about that kid growing up in that place where I grew up and what chance that kid's got to get out of those projects and lead a good life, and what policies we can use to move that forward. That's always been my North Star. It's getting stuff done. But sadly, there's too much that's put in our way to not get things done. For instance, I look at this Commonwealth Fund report that just came out. I'm sure you probably saw this. That points out that we in this country spend almost twice as much as every other country in the OECD OEDC world on healthcare. Yet we get worse outcomes, have higher suicide rates, higher deaths from preventable diseases, higher infant mortality, higher maternal mortality. All of the negatives. Not even, and no universal coverage, and yet we can't seem to solve very simple problems like this. We should have every child with health care. Every adult should be covered. No one should die of a preventable disease in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization. That should be the minimum.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Getting there at this point, given what's going on, not just for the last 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but for decades now in our healthcare system, and the technology that's been advanced, and the number of things that we see coming up, the pharmaceutical industry, all of that, it's such a major problem that we've got right now. It is going to take an awful lot to try to fix that and get to it. You cannot wave a magic wand anymore and try to get that done. One would think that we can do it, but it goes back in a lot of ways to political power. Everybody, I guarantee you, Rick, everybody that you talk to on the Hill, if you just took your speech just then and asked them, are you in favor of this? I don't think anybody would say, no, I'm not in favor of improving that. I'm not in favor of improving health outcomes. I'm not in favor of improving, getting more cost-efficient health care. And even universal health care, if you define universal, meaning everyone has an opportunity for good quality health care. I think everybody would agree with it. Getting there is really difficult, though, because of the infrastructure that's already in place, and breaking through with that. We couldn't even get in Alabama, and I think it's now down to about 13 or 14 other states, to expand Medicaid when they had 3 years of an opportunity where they wouldn't have to pay one damn dime back. Not one dime back to the federal government. 3 years, just billions of dollars that was going to come in to my state over a 10-year or 12-year period. They wouldn't do it because the Affordable Care Act got nicknamed after a former president. And it was a purely political decision. They hid behind the money that ultimately they couldn't get the money. And it was just a fallacy. So everything comes down to right now the political power. I think what we saw playing out in the House of Representatives vote for a speaker, the 15 votes for a speaker, is kind of a microcosm of what we see so much. And that is people will do or say just about anything in order to get their power, to keep their power, to get that gavel. And that is a problem that is going to take a lot of political courage for folks to stand up and break and get with folks on both sides of the aisle and do the things that you're talking about to, quote, get things done. Because you're right, that's what the American people want. Polling after poll after poll, focus group after focus group, that's what it's all about.
No, it's absolutely. But the sad reality is we can't fix simple things. I mean, look at this debt ceiling fight, and I'm sure you're probably as frustrated as I am with this. I view the people who are in charge of the House right now as people who literally want to shoot the hostage. I mean, we've created another hostage situation with this debt ceiling, and I believe there are people right now who would be okay with sending us into default if it meant that they didn't get their pound of flesh. And I fear what that means for working people, not just in this country, but across the globe, because we've got people who want the center stage.
No, there's no question. And the sad thing is, most of those people really don't know what the consequences would be,
or care
to the United States, or they might care if they really knew. I don't think that they really bother to look and see, and they start confusing the debt limit and a default with a government shutdown because we can't get a budget. Two completely different things. They don't consider the fact that the debt limit issue and raising the debt limit is for all of those bills that have been stacking up over time, including all of the bills that stacked up during the Trump administration, which these same people generally voted to raise the debt limit every time it was asked because we had to. And the consequences are dire. Look, I was a little bit encouraged today when I heard both coming out of the White House and Speaker McCarthy say that they had a frank discussion and they want to have more. At least it wasn't I was expecting the worst from that meeting today. And we didn't see that. We've got until June. So hopefully something will be worked out and cooler heads can prevail. And we can, because at the end of the day, the debt ceiling has got to be raised one way or another. We've got to get it done. Everyone knows that. And I think it'll happen. I'm just going to be, there will be people voting against it though.
Sure, there will be. Absolutely.
There are always the people that'll vote on it as a matter of principle. Their vote will not count and they know it. It's a safe vote for them and they can demagogue it. And I think our job, part of the job is going forward is to remind people that they did not vote to do that and what the consequences would be. We've got to turn those tables on them somehow and not let them get away with making a political statement on something as important as because you hit something that I also don't think people fully appreciate. And it's not just our 401ks. It's not just your defined benefit plans and retirement. This would be a worldwide problem if the United States of America defaulted on its debt obligations. A worldwide problem at a time when the economies of this world and the economy of this country is slowly getting back. Inflation is slowly getting under control. People are working. Things are going on. But we still have a war in Ukraine. We still have the possibility of an economic collapse if we don't stay this kind of course. It would be a serious matter that I just don't think folks fully appreciate it. And they want to play politics with it. And that I'm as frustrated with that as you are.
And it's not just playing politics, Doug. It's the fact that they seem to want to use it as an opportunity to tick some things off of their wet dream list. Going after Social Security and Medicare. Why in the name of why would you choose that the first club out of the bag? And for me, it's really telling that the first club out of the bag is we've got to go after these quote unquote entitlement programs. No, Social Security and Medicare are not entitlement programs. We paid for those. We earned those. It's not a deserved thing. We earned those. We paid for them. They're ours. Stop trying to destroy them. And this is my problem with this whole setup. Working people constantly are taking it on the chin at every frame, whether it's the Fed raising interest rates, seeming to want to move us towards a recession, or Republicans trying to take away what little safety net we've got left.
Well, I agree with you, except I'll defend the Fed a little bit. I think that the Fed had to take some aggressive action because those interest rates are the one thing that they could do to cool the economy a little bit. It was pumping out fast and furious. And with interest rates rising, the inflation rate has started to subside. It's why you saw the Fed today just raise by 1/4 of a point rather than 1/2 or 3/4 of a point. That is a good sign. That is a really good sign. However, on the other hand, it's all the other factors that we've still got to deal with. And you're absolutely right. Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all of that is being paid for. Every paycheck, we pay for it. And I think that got such blowback throughout remember, it was an issue in the 2022 midterms where Rick Scott and others were talking about people having skin in the game, talking about privatizing, talking about reauthorizing it, every year. Hell, if you can't raise the debt limit, how are you going to reauthorize Social Security, Medicare, which is so contentious among some people? So it was raised then. I think people soundly rejected that. Donald Trump even has said, leave it alone with regard to the debt ceiling. That doesn't mean he's saying leave it off, take it off the table. He's just saying don't make it a part of the debt ceiling. I think McCarthy has said that too, but there are still people out there. And that's driven by, the folks, I think, on Wall Street and other places that would make money on privatizing Social Security and other programs like that. So.
No, look, I mean, for all of the horrible that people are saddled with in this moment, I think we're moving in a direction that is positive. I think we're investing in infrastructure, reshoring some manufacturing. I saw the president this week was in New York and saying, look, we're going to build the tunnel that the New York, New Jersey area has desperately needed for many years. There's massive investments going. This is a step in the right direction. And again, I come back to, I had someone remind me that after World War II, we had a big bit of inflation as well because of demand and people getting back into the economy, except we handled it differently. We handled it by massive investments. We handled it with stronger unions fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, instead of what we seem to be going through right now.
Yeah, look, one thing you mentioned, the unions, and one fact I heard last week when I was in D.C. and then again this week, and I did not know it, but we're seeing an uptick in union membership. And Alabama, okay, Rick, Alabama led the country in an increase in union membership last year. And I just, we were a strong union state, and it really helped the state a lot. And I think, hopefully things are turning around on that a little bit. I do think that when people are concerned about the debt, they hear about the debt. And that's one of those issues, Rick, that I think Republicans especially can demagogue to death about the debt and how we're leveraging and mortgaging our grandchildren. And there's some validity to some of the things they're saying, but it overlooks a couple of things. It overlooks, number one, Donald Trump and his tax cuts for the richest corporations and the richest people in the country contributed to that debt significantly. I mean, in a big, big way. The second thing that contributed to it was COVID. I was in the Senate when we had to pass a $2 trillion emergency relief plan, the largest in the history of this country. And it passed almost unanimously in the Senate and in the House because we were trying our best to save lives and save businesses and save jobs, and we did the best we could. It was not a perfect bill by any stretch. And the third thing that I think people forget and maybe don't even know is that the last budget in this last year, this administration, the Biden administration, lowered that debt by over $1 trillion. The work that this administration has done has been to try to start whittling away at our national debt. And it will continue to do that but you've got to do it in a responsible way. You can't do anything if you're not going to pay your bills.
No, and look, I say this all the time. The time to fight over spending is before you spend the money. It's not like I get to go to the restaurant, I get to eat, and I get to go, you know what, I decided, no, I'm not going to pay for it. Dining and dashing is not something we should be doing yet. We've got some in the Senate who, like I've said, they want to shoot the hostage or they want to shoot the chef. They want to dine and dash.
Yeah, it's. I think it's primarily over in the House. There are going to be those in the Senate for sure, but I think at the House is going to be the real key there. We've got a number of factors in the Senate that I think are working in our favor, but look, let's see how this plays out a little bit. Everybody wants to. It's really easy to play chicken right now when you're still 5 months away from this issue. What I hope people will understand, though, is if they want to play chicken for a little bit, do it for just a little bit, because as we get closer to the debt ceiling deadline and we get closer to Armageddon on that issue, then the markets and the economy is going to start. We're going to feel it. They're going to, in anticipation of that. Markets don't just react overnight. Sometimes they start getting jittery and things start happening. People are going to be moving their stocks into cash. There's going to be a lot of things going on. So they need to come up with something to where they can go ahead and do this now, get this over with, get it down the road so we can move on. And then if you want to talk about spending, it's a legitimate issue in the United States Congress to talk about spending taxpayer dollars. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Last line of questioning I wanted to get into, classified documents. You've talked about this extensively. They searched President Biden's, I guess, his beach house now. They didn't find anything. They searched his house. They didn't find anything. It seems like classified documents are turning up all over the place. Is there a way forward on this? I mean, and does this exonerate Trump from any of his problems with the pretty folders that he collected because they had nice words on them?
I think all of these are going to stand on their own. And Rick, if people that have followed me when all of the stuff with Mar-a-Lago hit, I have always been consistent about this, that all of this is about the documents. It's not about prosecuting. It's not about investigations. It is really about getting the documents back. That's why the DOJ and Archive spent a lot of effort giving Donald Trump every benefit of the doubt to return everything. But there was someone in that Trump world that kept telling them, you need to come back because you ain't got them all. There's still stuff there. And lo and behold, there was stuff there. And I know there's a lot of people that have been talking about how you distinguish that with what happened with President Biden and now Vice President Pence. Documents got in their possession. They ended up in places that they shouldn't have been. But the president's lawyers, when they find out, they make a decision. They're going to completely cooperate. They're going to work with them. They're going to go through. They're going to allow DOJ to search the premises just so that they'll take any thing away from any criticism that maybe they're hiding something or doing something. Vice President Pence likewise is embarrassed that he had documents in his possession. There's a couple of problems here with this.
And it's something we're certainly going to have to deal with. We'll see where this takes us. But
including, Rick, real quick, including the fact that we need to not classify so damn many of them. I can tell you from firsthand, it's way overclassified.
Good stuff. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the time.
All right, buddy. Take care.
It's a 1 in 100 year weather event, and we seem to be getting a lot of them at the moment.
Torrential rains and floods in New Zealand shatter all-time records. Building new wind and solar projects is cheaper than running existing coal plants, new study confirms. Plus, Biden protects northern Minnesota wilderness from mining for 20 years.
All of those somewhat good and somewhat not so good stories straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Without oil, we would lose so many precious products like hair gel, or the bottle the hair gel comes in, or the chemicals I use to get the hair gel out of my hair. And that's just my hair, Wanda. I mean, think of how much hair is in the world. Probably hundreds.
Look, okay.
Probably. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, astounding rainfall in New Zealand. Good Lord.
Yes, indeed. A state of emergency has been declared in Auckland, New Zealand, after a record-shattering deluge hit New Zealand's North Island on Friday, triggering extreme flash floods and landslides that caused significant damage across Auckland, shutting down the city, destroying hundreds of homes, and killing at least 4 people. Nearly 10 inches of rain in 24 hours obliterated Auckland's all-time single-day rainfall record. New Zealand's new Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, called the catastrophic deluge a signal to speed up efforts to prepare for more frequent and intense extreme weather disasters brought by man-made climate change.
Climate change is real. It's with us. It's having an impact on our weather. We are seeing more of these extreme weather events. We're going to have to deal with more of these extreme weather events in the near future. We need to be prepared for that. And we need to do everything that we can to combat the challenge of climate change.
Maybe one of the problems is this exchange with whoever this news reporter is speaking with the Prime Minister.
Do you think it's climate change?
Yes.
Why do we even need to ask a question like that at this point? It's insane.
Speaking of insane, here in the U.S., taxpayers in Pennsylvania may be on the hook for cleanup of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells in the state. A new report by the State Department of Environmental Protection found that half of the conventional oil and gas operators failed to follow state law in reporting how much fossil fuel they pulled from the ground and reporting spills of drilling fluids onto the ground or into water.
Oh, oops.
And worse, agency inspectors found more than 3,000 newly abandoned wells in just 5 years.
3,000 abandoned wells.
Yep. Abandoned wells are sources of air, water, and soil pollution and leak dangerous climate-warming methane. The state estimates it already has 200,000 abandoned wells to clean up at an average cost of $30,000 per well.
The state has to clean that up.
Yep.
So the fossil fuel companies make the profits and then
skip town.
And the taxpayers left to clean up. Nice.
But some good news. A new study confirms that building new wind and solar projects costs less than keeping existing coal plants open in the U.S. That's due to long-term trends and the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act. The new analysis by think tank Energy Innovation found that if power companies utilize the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act that reduce the upfront cost of building wind and solar projects, then renewables beat all but one existing coal plant in the U.S. on cost.
Wow.
Doing so would also have external benefits like using much less water and result in immediately cleaner air and water. More good news. The world has enough rare earth minerals and other critical raw materials to complete the switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy to produce electricity and mitigate global warming.
Are you sure?
That's according to a new study that found the world has enough supplies of raw materials required to make the global transition away from fossil fuels, and that counters concerns about the supplies of such materials.
But that's going to require a whole lot of mining, is it not?
Yes, more mining will be needed, but the researchers calculated that it won't significantly worsen global warming or pollution, and they say overall it will be much less than the mining required for fossil fuels. The lead author told AP, quote, "Decarbonization is going to be big and messy, but at the same time, we can do it." Finally, the Biden Interior Department late last week effectively banned mining in northern Minnesota's pristine Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness for 20 years and revoked a mining and water pollution permit granted by the Trump administration to a foreign mining company. The department cited scientific data showing the mine would cause unavoidable and irreversible levels of toxic pollution in the watershed. The move is a victory for Native American tribes and protects the region's billion-dollar outdoor recreation economy.
So Donald Trump had given approval to a foreign company to come here and mine our stuff? What happened to America first? You know, I'm starting to not trust that guy. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are
you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Thoughts, questions, comments, want to hear it. Nikki Haley running for president. And this is one of those things where you go, will the pie fight begin? Is this the moment where all the gloves are going to be off? Where the female Trump now comes out? Because, look, I got to tell you, I think she can be every bit as vicious as he ever was. And with some insight. Now she has said that she's going to announce. She announced she's running for president, and she will announce in a February 15th special announcement. I guess this is teasing the announcement to get it out there. And this is, again, I look at this moment that we're in, and I'm hopeful, because what I see coming out of the Biden administration is hopeful stuff. It's moving us in a direction that I think is undoing some of the horrible of the past. And I've talked about this before. You're trying to undo some of the neoliberal supply side voodoo Reaganomics stuff of the past, and moving towards reshoring manufacturing and capacity here and positives. Yet the moneyed interests, the entrenched moneyed interests, not well coming along. And the frustrating part of this is, man, they control the media. I was reading something today, and it said, is there 90% of everything we see, hear, and read are owned by these 6 big corporations, and they go, that's not new. But what's new is we don't talk about it anymore. We don't do it anymore. And I'm in this moment where the hope is that we find that common ground once again, where we again come back to somewhere near the sane line, and somewhere near the hope that we can move forward. Because again, I come back to this analogy. I used to believe that we were all on the same, in the same book at least. We all wanted the same things: good schools, safe neighborhoods, good jobs, retirement security, health security. To lead that American dream that we were sold as kids. The white picket fence, 2.3 children, the dog, the car, and the driveway vacations. All that's kids going to college life. That stuff that we've been, told that's the American dream. And yet what I'm seeing increasingly is we're not in the same book. We're not even in the same freaking library half the time. And is it, and this is what the question comes back to, is social media distorting reality? Because when I talk face to face to people, it seems that we're somewhere in the same neighborhood. As Doug Jones said a moment ago, walk up to any of those senators or those Congress people and say, are you okay with the system that we have, that we're paying twice as much for health care as any industrialized country in the world and getting much worse outcomes? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with children who don't get to see doctors and families who have to go bankrupt because they can't afford their medical bills? Are you okay with that system? And none of them would say yes. The problem is there's so much entrenched interest that maybe these problems are so insurmountable that they're never going to get fixed. And that's a fear. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on one. Alice, how we doing?
Totally insane, but you'll have it.
Understandable.
So, yes. So I got a couple little things to bring up. number one, you were wondering about the gun police. Well, honey, they're with the Merry Christmas police and, of course, the gas range police. We never see them. They sneak around. That's the only thing I can figure.
The stove troopers are coming.
Yes, yes. And then the other thing I was going to say is, you got Nikki Haley, and, Marjorie Taylor Greene is wanting so bad to be Trump's running mate for the vice president position. And I'm just sitting back going, oh, this is going to get real interesting real fast.
Yeah.
Because I can just see MGT deciding to go on the attack, for fear that Trump might pick Nikki. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. So maybe we could just sit back with the popcorn and watch them destroy each other.
Watch Rome burn. Is that where you're going? All right. I see you.
Yes,
I see what you're saying. I appreciate the thoughts. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well. It's interesting. She brings up Marjorie, 3 names. Now, you remember, and I took some heat from this. I said Democrats made a huge mistake, throwing her off of the committees. Granted, she had no business being there, but I said it was a bad idea. Bad idea taking people off committees, and now they're paying for it because Republicans have thrown Swalwell and Schiff off of committees, and they're trying to get this Ilhan Omar off of committees as well. And you knew that was coming, tit for tat. You knew it was coming. So don't act shocked. Oh, can't believe they did it. They told you they were doing it, and they did it. But I said at the beginning, it was a dumb idea. I said leave Marjorie, 3 names right where she was. In fact, put her in charge of committees. I want her on every committee. I wanted her on every committee so that she could say dumb stuff, as she's going to do. For instance, she was in a hearing today, I believe it was, asking a witness about school funding, and well, the hilarity ensued. Here's Marjorie, 3 names. Or not. Somehow the audio for Marjorie has not played. Anyway, Marjorie basically says, hey, look, what we know, can you tell me how much money went to CRT? Her for those who don't know, and the witness did not know or asked for clarification, CRT is the theory on race that's critical. She said, how much went to this? And he said, CRT? And she said, it's a racist curriculum used to teach children that somehow their white skin was not equal to black skin and other things. And she went on to say that there's a school in Illinois that was given $5.1 billion to teach diversity, inclusiveness, and equality. $5.1 billion. For me, I want her saying these dumb things because no one's teaching elementary schools about critical race theory. Nobody. And yet she's got it in her twisted little head that it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And we're spending billions on it. Virginia's looking at potentially screwing up their entire education system because they had a Post-it note that lost $200 million. Can you imagine what $5.1 billion would do for one little middle school in the middle of Illinois? And how do I get to that school district? And then, the same thing with Gun Fetish Barbie. You had Lauren Boebert, who on the floor giving her speech, said a recent report stated that Americans own 46% of the world's guns. And she said, I think we need to get that number up, boys and girls. We're 4% of the world's population. We own 46% of the world's guns. I think we got enough. But in their world, this isn't weird. To the average American who goes, wait a second, I don't have health care. Wait a second. We're struggling to keep food on the table. Wait a second. We've got all these other problems and you're fetishizing guns. She went on to say that alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, that's a fun weekend in Western Colorado. Yeah, real responsible, Congresswoman. Congresswoman. These people should be on every committee so that you can see right up front. Now, understand, it's all a game. It's shtick. You know, she came in on this PR campaign of, look at me, I'm little Annie Oakley. But it filters down. For instance, the report came out today that the House Natural Resource Committee Republicans defeated a push to reinstate a carry ban in committee rooms. They don't want people carrying guns in the committee rooms. Okay, I kind of get that. You know, who knows where that goes? And you know, the chairperson was asked, this Bruce Westerman was asked repeatedly to clarify what the policy was going to be. And you know, I guess it was jokingly, I guess it was, or maybe made to be an intimidation tactic. You know, asked all the people to, you know, how many people here are carrying guns, and nobody raised their hands. And then how many people would tell you, nobody raised their hands. It's kind of like, yeah, we've all got them. So you be worried, you liberals, because we're going to make you angry. But here's my question, and this is where I come back to this, because I'm a believer in, okay, if that's, when in Rome, am I going to carry behind me a trolley of a 50 caliber machine gun because I need to feel safe? Because Gun Fetish Barbie, and this is the problem that I have with my fetish friends. She said she doesn't feel safe anywhere without a gun in her possession. That sounds like a mental illness. And do we want those people in Congress making laws? Scary times. Especially when we have, and I don't doubt her. I actually don't doubt her numbers, that we've got 46% of the guns on this planet. And yet we're just 4% of the population. But hey, remember, Wayne LaPierre said the gun confiscators are coming, along with the stove troopers, and along with the light bulb police, and along with, you name it, name the outrage. MS-13, I'm sure, will be part of it as well. And they're going to turn your children. They're coming for the children. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Tennessee, new bills filed in the Tennessee General Assembly. And I love how they frame this. Add legal protection for some abortions in the state. We're going to add some legal protections for abortions. Yes, we're doing the same thing. Until you read what some of these protections are, because again, we're criminalizing what people do with their bodies. And Tennessee being, one of the leaders in this, we're basically hamstringing the medical profession because, look, I'll be the first to tell you I don't know anything about the medical side of this, but the stories that I've read and the people that we've talked to, you've got doctors who are playing defense. If a pregnant woman comes in, I feel for them, especially in a country that now has the highest, not only infant mortality rate, but maternal mortality rate. And now you add on top of this, you add on this, we're going to make it a defense, an affirmative defense, life of the mother. So rape, incest, life of the mother are now going to be maybe part of the Tennessee abortion ban. Maybe this is a piece of legislation that maybe. And what they're putting into this, and look, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up forcing women into being liars. And you're going to end up forcing them into making false accusations. And then, according to this law, criminals, because they wanted to, exercise control over their own bodies. But like I said, it includes several requirements, rape, incest, all that. And you have to report it to law enforcement or to a rape crisis center who will then report it to law enforcement. So there has to be a report. So you got to go through a process. There's no, hey, this happened. I don't want to get into it. No. There has to be a report, and they have to go forward with it, or nothing for you. You have to submit to a forensic medical exam. Yeah, and you have to do this in a period of time that, if you're younger than 12 years old, is no more than 10 weeks down the line. And if you're older than 13, no more than 8 weeks down the line. I'm not, I don't know. I'm not the brightest guy, but most people I know have told me that they don't even know six weeks down the line, 8 weeks down the line, if they are. So this seems like chaos. And that's the point. The point is to seem somewhat reasonable while creating this environment of criminality. And for me, the one part that is most important is the medical aspect of this. What if truly you're talking life and death, spur of the moment? And these doctors have to make these decisions in the spur of the moment, or people are going to die. And this maternal death rate that we lead the world in could actually get worse. Because again, it's a defense. It's not a right. You don't go, it's not like our police departments have this ability to go, I was feared for my life. I had to shoot him. Oh, okay. Qualified immunity. Yeah, no worries. Gotcha. You were feared. Yeah, I understand. Doctor can't say I was in fear that she would lose her life. There's no qualified immunity for that. And this is the weird kind of place that we're in on this issue. And as I've said, a number of times, I wish we had policies that moved us in different directions. I see no legislation anywhere that would encourage people to have kids. Nowhere. And you go, well, wait a second. If you really wanted to stop abortions, maybe stop pregnancies. That seems a logical place to start, right? So, during the Obama years, tried to get contraception into health plans. Well, the crazy religious people went nuts. Went to the Supreme Court, and our Supreme Court said, well, religious freedom. They can deny their employees contraception. You go, how is that? It seems like the sane, rational way to go. But we're going to criminalize that too. In fact, there's organizing going on right now that over the next several months, you're going to see those, because, if they've shut down the abortion clinic, where are all those people who don't have lives or anything to do, who are marching out in front of the abortion clinics with the fetus pictures? Where are they going to go? Well, they need a hobby. They need something to do. Well, they're going to put them out in front of the CVS and not in front of the Walgreens and not in front of the drugstores because, well, the next target is contraception. The next target is Griswold. The next target is that. And you know it. You see it coming. And look, I get the emails. They're already organizing around that idea. We hear it now. It's medically induced abortion. It's what birth control is every month. It's prevention. You remember when there was a guy that had a flag, or that wasn't a flag, it was a kite, right? A kite with a key. We learned about him in like elementary school. Made a potbelly stove. He's postmaster general. Electricity, something. Remember him? Had a saying. What was it? Ounce of prevention, pound of cure. Wasn't that him? Or maybe that was Poor Richard in his almanac. I'm not sure. But it was one of those. But it made sense. We prevent things. But I don't see any pieces of legislation anywhere moving us in that direction. Nowhere. Nowhere is there a universal prevention bill to say, look, okay, well, if we're going to make this illegal, we're going to help prevent it. And then I don't see any of the other bills. If you're forcing people to have children, I see none of the supports. What are you doing to these children? What kind of abusive, what kind of lives are you leading for these kids where we're not getting them health care, we're not ensuring that they get a good education, we're not ensuring that they've got opportunities, we're not ensuring anything. Where's that legislation? Where are all these pro-life warriors to make life better? Where are these pro-life warriors to make sure that mothers don't die giving birth? Where are these pro-life warriors to make sure that people don't starve and go hungry? Where are these people? Oh, that's right. They're going to be marching in front of the CBS. And it's angering to me because look, I get it. I'm not in favor of abortion myself. I'm on the pro-safety side. I want it to be safe and legal. That's it. If my daughters ever decided or my wife ever decided this was the route they were going to go, I want them safe. I don't want anyone dying in an alley. But we're not talking about any of the other solutions. We're talking about the one thing. We got a hammer and everything's a nail. And instead of saying, okay, if you're going to force people to do it, how about the other stuff? How about we work to make lives better? Why can't we start with healthcare? Why can't we start with education? No, we can't do that. Because, once they're born, they're on their own, right? Once they're out, pull yourself up by those proverbial bootstraps. Or the umbilical strap. I mean, this is the weird place where our policymakers have shoved us. And it's all these zealots. And this is what gerrymandering has done to this country. It's created these pockets of zealotry where there's no competition for ideas because, look, there should be a competing equal bill to say, no, there should be abortion clinics there should be drive-through abortion clinics. Now, I'm not in favor of that either, but look, if men had to give birth, there would be drive-through abortion clinics. In fact, we'd be giving awards away for the men who had the most. I guarantee it. But because this is more about power and control than it is about the children, they don't care about the kids. They don't care about the children. They don't. Because there's no policy to make those kids' lives better. It's front and center and apparent. And they're not even trying to hide it. That's the part that gets me. I hope you see that. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, charter schools. Oh, boy. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1960. That was the day that 4 black freshman students from the Agricultural and Technical College of North Carolina sat down to make a stand for justice. Ezell Blair Jr., Franklin McCain, Joseph McNeil, and David Richmond visited a whites-only lunch counter at the Woolworth store in Greensboro, North Carolina. They were determined to challenge the racial discrimination of the Jim Crow South. They had planned their actions ahead of time, arranging for media coverage. The A&T 4 took their seats at the counter, ordering coffee and a slice of cherry pie. Soon, police arrived to eject the 4 black patrons. They refused to give up their seats. They stayed until the counter closed, returning the next day with more supporters. The sit-in had been a successful strategy of the U.S. labor movement in the 1930s. It was a powerful tactic to build solidarity, garner public attention, and bring about change. Members of the Congress of Racial Equality had also used the sit-in during their organizing for civil rights in the 1940s. The Greensboro action sparked an unprecedented wave of sit-ins for civil rights. Mass mobilizations for sit-ins swept the South. That year, thousands of black students participated in sit-ins or marched in support of the actions. These black students faced insults, violence, and 1,500 were arrested. Their actions brought national attention to Southern segregation and helped to set in motion the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In 2010, the AFL-CIO held a 50th anniversary commemoration with the 3 living participants of the Greensboro sit-in. AFL-CIO Executive Vice President Arlene Holt Baker told the men, "We thank you for the vision, the faith, for being crazy enough to believe you could change America and make it better for us."
An old political saying notes that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. However, given the proliferation of today's goofball culture wars and fanatical right-wing phobias, that truism should be updated to say evil swarms when power-hungry leaders unleash the crazies. Which brings us to the U.S. House of Representatives, now led by a run-of-the-mill corporate Republican, Kevin McCarthy. He's always been a crassly ambitious political climber, untethered to any moral principle larger than his own ego. So he's not trusted, even by GOP lawmakers. Indeed, in an almost comical public spectacle, it took 4 days and 15 rounds of voting in January before Kevin could cut enough desperate deals to get the slimmest majority of his own Republican colleagues to make him Speaker of the House. To squeak out his win, though, he had to hand big chunks of his official power to a gaggle of extremist, far-right-wing legislators who are, in a word, bonkers. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, and other members of the GOP's Kooky Caucus promote unhinged QAnon conspiracy theories, warn that Jews are firing lasers from outer space to start wildfires, lionize Vladimir Putin and Adolf Hitler, call for the execution of Democratic leaders, and insist that the government is staging school shootings as an excuse to outlaw guns. Okay, they're nuts, and politics makes strange bedfellows. But McCarthy has not just climbed into bed with them. He's snuggling up tightly, naming them to powerful committees, publicly legitimizing their screwballism, and intentionally bringing the evil of bigotry, intolerance, and even fascism in from the fringe of politics to sit in the seat of power. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is shameful, and it's dangerous. Evil swarms when so-called leaders meekly give permission for crazies to use the government power to rule over us.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Nazi homeschooling. Yeah, the Ohio Department of Education, as we've been talking about the last couple of days, looking into the Nazi homeschooling. And again, this is all predictable. And look, the more you pull back the layers of all of this school choice stuff, all of the voucher schemes, all of the privatization, all of the homeschooling, you're going to find, oh my goodness, the kind of craziness that Nazi homeschooling will bring us. And I guarantee that's probably not even the worst of it. And that's the weird part of this. And understand, it's not about making lives better. As I said a moment ago, it's not about making kids' lives better. It's about power and control. It's about the moneyed interests exacting their power. And here to share some thoughts on, well, look at these schemes. all of them, from the charters to the vouchers to the cyber charters to all of this stuff. Who's behind it and who benefits? Is it your kids? Is it mine? I don't think so. That's why I've asked Lisa Graves to come talk with us. She's the executive director of True North Research, their website, truenorthresearch.org. They are in my view, one of the top corporate watchdog groups, and they've done some work on this issue. Lisa, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, Rick, thank you so much for inviting me on. I appreciate the chance to talk with you about this.
So, I look at this and it looks like every state's got their own scheme on how to get into the education dollars and to privatize education. And the spiel is always the same. Parents should have choice. Lisa, parents should have choice. Why would you be against choice?
Well, that's the language they co-opted from the actual choice movement, which many of these same groups have actively opposed women's reproductive choice. But it's branding for them. In reality, this is a long time scheme. It's been pushed by so-called libertarians and so-called conservatives. But it's really about power, as you mentioned, Rick, and money and control. You can see some of the roots going back to the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which many people now remember as one of the most important and best decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court in its history, but at the time was assailed vilely by racists and folks on the right. Some of them were Democrats, some were Republicans back then. But there was an effort to try to stop racial integration of the schools, and that has taken on different forms in the 21st century. But the roots of that go back to that decision in 1954, where the court said the Constitution's equal protection of the laws applies to all people, that kids can't be segregated based on race in schools. And then you've just seen so many permutations of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, these different schemes to try to privatize public schools to get around integration, racial integration, but also to try to stop kids from learning about our history and our society and the way science works, the way human bodies work, the way biology works. And so this is, part of a longer term strategy, but we've just seen such an acceleration of it, as you point out, in these state legislatures over these past few years, and right now in these new state legislative sessions with these sort of right-wing Trump-aligned extremists really going after the public schools, trying to redirect those dollars to private hands with hardly any oversight. And I can talk a bit more about that, what the schemes we've seen, the schemes that have been uncloaked, that have just been rampant with fraud, rampant with waste, and also really miseducating kids. Really not making sure that our children, America's children, have the best education, that they are learning science and history and math, but instead are being taught by people who are unqualified to teach, and people who are teaching things like that expose, in terms of Nazi ideology or racist ideology. It's really shocking that this is where we are in the year 2023. No,
look, I've known some people who have who homeschool their kids, and some of them do, I guess, an okay job, but the majority of them I know it's for religious reasons. And I had one guy tell me the only book my kid needs is the Bible, because we quote them and tote them. And I'm going, turn to the page on math, and it's again not there, but it's that ideology that you speak of. It's this creating the words that they use, Christian warriors. Kind of concerning.
It is. I have family members who have done homeschooling. I have friends who are either advocates themselves or escaped, got away from that sort of environment. I remember meeting a woman in my geology class, my lab partner, who turned to me and told me that she didn't believe that the earth was anything more than 8,000 years old, that science was all made up, that she was homeschooled and this is what she'd learned from her parents and the Bible. And people have a right to their religious beliefs. But what we're seeing now is this effort to try to redirect public funds to reinforce that religious indoctrination, which, certainly has the transmission of morality, which I expect parents are doing on a daily basis, regardless of where their kids go to school. But the idea that public tax dollars should then be subsidizing the type of things that expose revealed is just really shocking. And, that's not the only thing. We've seen money going into vouchers for schools where kids are taught that they're evil. Now, that can be a tenet of religious faith and a basis for someone, being baptized, based on their faith. But that's a very different thing than universal public education for all kids in America, to access for people of all faiths or no faith, people whose parents raised them in a particular religion or raised them to have other ethical, ethical bases for action and kindness. But the idea that our public schools should not either exist, which is certainly the goal of some of these individuals, or that money should just be redefined as public schools if it's a school in someone's home, without any oversight, without any rules, with just this minimal testing. It's really extraordinary. And I think it not only hurts our society to have this sort of free-for-all happening where so much money is trying to be pushed into situations where you don't have people who are trained properly to be teachers, who don't have the certification, don't have the knowledge base to really understand the different types of ways that people learn, that children learn, to not really have the substantive training in the different fields like science and math, as you point out, Rick. They may have training in a religious field or a different field that they majored in, but they don't have that training. That's not a first-class education. That's not a high-quality world-class education, which, we need in our country and we need in the world for America to not be, regressing by having our school dollars captured by the loudest few who want to basically kill public schools and get their hands on that money themselves.
No, and look, this is the thing that frustrates me, is because we are the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest moment. And we're squandering it by ensuring that the wealthy are able to extract a huge portion of it, whether it's healthcare or education now. Healthcare incorporated, what was supposed to keep us healthy and help us get through rough times, has a profit motive now. Education is that new shiny thing that corporate America wants to delve their hands into. And I understand that, but it seems like now there are competing groups to destroy public education. Before it was just, hey, how much can we screw the taxpayer? Now it's more about, I fear, it's about, well, screwing the taxpayer, obviously, but it's about that control issue. It's about the indoctrination that they claim that the left is doing to their children. It's really about indoctrinating them into some weird kind of cult mentality that I see.
Well, I think this moment, has to be seen through the lens of race, where there's just this rise of racism, unfortunately, and this hostility to the idea of teaching African American studies, teaching about the African American contributions. I know growing up that, I had an incomplete education. I was not learning about as much about our history. I certainly wasn't learning much about modern American history. Learned a lot about battles in the American Revolution and the Civil War, but didn't really learn about what was happening in the social movements, the way that people in America who were protesting the draft in World War I were assailed, were jailed. Didn't learn really about 100 years of racial segregation by law in America that was finally thrown off through the Voting Rights Act, through the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and the 65 Voting Rights Act, and more. Didn't really learn much about that history. And I've been glad that American kids are learning more about American history. I'm glad that they're learning more about science and math, and and it's just really sad to see such a reaction to this. And also, just quite frankly, I know so many kids I grew up with who really struggled socially. Some of them were gay. We didn't even really have much of the language to talk about that at the time. Kids in schools across the country commit suicide because they feel like their identity, their true selves, can't be reflected. And I've been so inspired by these young people, by these younger generations coming out and saying, love is love, and people have a right to be respected regardless of their gender or whether they're gay or straight or LGBTQ, but have these parents reacting with such hostility, like what was happening in Texas. This idea that they're going to go after the parents and go after the kids who are already the most at-risk kids in the country. I just would say to you, Rick, like, I can't imagine being in a circumstance where, I didn't feel like I could express my love for the person I was in love with, if it was a woman, that I didn't feel like I could do that. And the idea that these kids are somehow an abomination, when in fact they're actually really brave. that they are determined to live their life and be happy and take on some of this, regressive ideas, because they just want to be respected. They just want to be who they are, and to have that be met, not just with, individual pockets of discrimination or hostility, but like organized, seemingly well-funded attacks by some of these so-called parents groups that are determined to repress those kids, attack their parents, attack doctors, attack teachers for daring to treat these kids with respect, to call them the names that the name or pronoun they want. It's just really appalling. It's shocking, the level of cruelty that behavior reveals.
Yeah, no, one of the big groups out there, this group's Moms for Liberty, which is kind of a joke if you stop and you really think about, what they stand for and all what you're saying. Moms, I would hope, would never treat their children that poorly. And if you're fighting for liberty, that ain't it. So again, these euphemistic names they come up with that are the antithesis of what they actually stand for, you see all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, a mother's love, and just, in the context as well of Tyree Nichols, calling out for his mother, this idea of what it means to love your child unconditionally, to want your child to be happy, to want your child to be free, and then to have these people use this branding as Moms for Liberty when they're trying to repress the teaching of history, repress kids who are LGBTQ. That's who they are. It's not a choice. That's who they are. And to just try to get books removed from libraries, it's just extraordinary. And as you said, they wrap themselves in essence in the American flag and in this language of liberty, but the actions are counter to liberty. And they through their PAC worked very hard to prop up and aid Ron DeSantis in his agenda, which is so extreme. And we're seeing books being covered with sheets to keep people from even seeing the what's on the title on the binding. It's crazy that this is America right now, that this it's an effective form of book burning without the flames.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if you saw that book, I mean, I got to tell you, I didn't spend a lot of time in the library as a kid, but if I saw that book and it was covered and they were hiding it, wouldn't that make you want to read it all the more?
Oh my goodness, the Judy Blume books that made their way around, the 13, 14, 15-year-old girls that, were paperbacks. I don't think we even had them at the library at the time, but that was the most sought after. Those were the ones that were banned, were the most sought after books. You had that situation in Virginia with the Virginia governor's race back in 2021, the trial balloon for some of this effort by right-wingers and Republicans to rebrand themselves as the Parents Party, even though they had done everything they could to block access to, paid leave for parents when their kids get sick, or to the children's health insurance program, to expanding that, or to children's lunch, to get free lunch. Like, they want to call themselves the Parents Party, while the policies that some of these groups like the Independent Women's Forum have put forward have been antithetical to the things that parents need and say they want. But you saw in that race in Virginia, which was apparently effective for them with Governor Youngkin, where they were attacking Toni Morrison's novel, which has been widely acclaimed as an important novel for high school kids and college kids to read. And just to have these battles be fought and refought over and over again, this effort to censor, wrapped in this morality, it really is a regressive pattern that we've seen over time, and it's not just happening spontaneously. It's being fueled by groups that have ties to Koch funding from the biggest, one of the richest billionaires in America. His organization, his corporation has said that they haven't specifically funded these censorship campaigns, but they fund the groups that have been pushing censorship campaigns. So
it trickles down.
And then you have other parts of this so-called movement on choice. You had Rupert Murdoch saying, that this was $1 trillion industry, and he basically wanted to get his hands on it. But then you have some of the richest families in America. The Walton family from the Walmart fortune has been pushing for privatization of public schools. The DeVos family, which comes from the Amway fortune, as well as the Prince Motor Fortune, Eric Prince and Betsy Prince DeVos, the fortune that came out of the components that they were providing to automobiles in Detroit. They have been pushing to kill public education for years now. That's the DeVos agenda. When you saw Betsy DeVos become the Secretary of Education, someone who basically said there shouldn't be public schools. It basically should be money going from the public to the private sector. She and her husband gave an interview to this thing called The Gathering that I wrote about a couple of years ago, in which the person said, well, you're super rich. Why don't you just create whatever private schools you want and fund them? Like, why are you so focused on public education? And she basically said, even with all their money, they didn't have enough money to basically take over the public schools and get religious education as the dominant form of education. Now, I have, my husband went to religious schools as a kid. I have a lot of friends who did it. I'm not opposed to it as a principle. What I'm saying though is, in the United States, we have a First Amendment that has barred the establishment of religion, and has for decades, the Constitution has been read to make sure that we're not subsidizing the establishment of religion or any particular other person's religious education, that people can pursue that on their own through their churches, through their synagogues, through their mosques, but that we, the people, through our tax dollars, should not be subsidizing private religious indoctrination. But what people like Betsy DeVos want, they don't want there to be public schools. They want there to be only private schools and religious schools at that, and really they're in their religion.
Yes,
their religious beliefs,
I wanted to get to
yours.
that. Not anything, not any other religion, because I've said once we get to the place where they want to take us, which is we're a Christian nation, and the fun will really begin to decide which sect wins out. When they start eating their own, that's when the real entertainment will begin. Because when you throw all this money in there, when that Hunger Games scenario comes on, that's when the real entertainment will begin.
Well, and that point goes I think to also this larger trend, which is I'm pro-choice. I have friends who are anti-choice or pro-life. That's their choice in a pluralistic, free society, a society that honors liberty and people's ability to make their own medical decisions. What we're seeing through the U.S. Supreme Court and through these efforts by people like Leonard Leo, this maestro of dark money who helped pack and capture the Supreme Court, what we're seeing is this not just willingness, but aggressive determination of people to impose their own religious beliefs as law. That's what the U.S. Supreme Court did in that decision last year in Dobbs. They didn't just issue a ruling about Roe and overturning 50 years of precedent, other precedent that they overturned last year and they're going to overturn this year. What they did was basically impose their own personal religious beliefs as law, as binding law on the rest of us, by saying that this ruling had to be reversed. And I can't think of anything more antithetical to liberty than the arrogance of believing that my religious beliefs should be imposed by law on other people, that other people should have to obey my religious beliefs. I don't think that any sort of modern American who cares about liberty would believe that it was okay to impose your religious beliefs as law on other people. And that includes, trying to bar women from getting access to abortion who are raped, and girls who are victims of incest by family members or other adults. Like, it is just shocking to me. Someone could make that decision for themselves that they don't want to have an abortion, but how dare they tell those people who've been victimized by someone that they can't make that choice, and that they can't do so because of someone else's religion, namely the religion of a legislator or a particular judge. Just like you were saying, Rick, at the beginning, you have these legislators who are now trying to basically use their power to redirect our tax dollars to these private schemes, some of which get some people very rich in these charter arenas, and without hardly any oversight, let alone this effort to try to subsidize religious schools.
Yeah, it's crazy, and the hope is that by having these conversations, people open their eyes and see what's right before us. That Education Incorporated is coming for your children's education, and not in a good way. Where can we go to get some more information on this?
Sure, we have some materials on our site, which is truenorthresearch.org. We've also done some writing with Truth Out on these issues in particular, to talk about who these groups are, what funding is known about them, who the people are, and kind of how they're connected to that broader privatization agenda. I care deeply about public schools, Rick, as I know you do, and about education. I want kids to have a great education. That includes math, science, and, in their home, it includes their own moral education from their parents, ethics and morals. But I think when it comes to our schools, we need to make sure that that kids are getting access to real knowledge about history and literature and science and math. Yep. That's one of the things that has made America so strong in the past century, was the advent of public schools that provided universal public education to all people in our democracy and about our democracy.
There you go, Lisa. I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Come back again real soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. Our good friend Lisa Graves. Make sure you check out their website, truenorthresearch.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913, marking the first day of the Paterson, New Jersey silk weavers' strike. During the strike, more than 20,000 silk weavers walked off the job. The strike started at the Doherty Silk Mill, where after years of declining wages, poor working conditions, and long work days, workers had endured the final straw, as management doubled the number of weaving looms handled by each worker from 2 to 4. The silk weavers decided to strike in protest. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, an organizer from the International Workers of the World, came to Paterson to help with the strike. Soon, ribbon makers, silk dryers, and other weavers joined the effort for improved working conditions. Demands quickly expanded to include the 8-hour day. Immigrant workers from 9 different countries participated in the action, which shut down nearly 300 silk mills in the city of Paterson. The strike lasted more than 5 months. More than 1,800 workers were arrested. Eventually, the strike was broken by management, with the workers gaining few concessions. During the strike, workers were forbidden from meeting in the city of Paterson by city officials. So the mayor of nearby Haledon invited the workers to meet in his town instead. Pietro Botto, an Italian weaver, had sympathy for the strikers, many of whom were Italian. He and his wife Maria offered his home as a meeting place. Huge crowds came to hear speakers such as Upton Sinclair and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn give speeches from the second-floor balcony of the Botto home. Today, the Victorian-style Botto home is the site of the American Labor Museum. You can visit the museum to learn more about the Paterson Silk Strike and about other important events in American labor history by visiting their website, www.labormuseum.net. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Are you tired of think tank-approved corporate news and Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, real quick, wanted to finish up with, on the education front. Look, conservatives have done a masterful job over the years of moving the curriculum in their favor. And most recently, you look at what DeSantis has been able to accomplish down in Florida as the College Board has stripped down the AP curriculum on African American studies to take out any of the conversations they had about black writers and scholars that had any association, even even very minor, with this theory on race that's critical. Any of the LGBT stuff, any of the black feminism stuff, any of that stuff, any of the things that they found objectionable, taken out, but did add black conservatism. So again, they play the long game because, well, they've got the power, the money, and the resources to do it, and they're shameless. And this is where we keep taking it on the chin. Look, at the end of the day, I want history. I want accurate history. We should know what happened. We should know the struggles. Not that it was our fault, but maybe so we learn not to let it happen again. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Appreciate you tuning in. Look forward to having you back here again next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.